The Grand Archive would later record it as the day of first contact, but Admiral Zextrol of the Galactic Confederation had a different name for it. The day everything changed. Standing on the command bridge of the Confederation flagship Eternal Dawn, the seasoned Phyrexian officer's four eyes widened as the sensor arrays blared with urgent alerts. Something massive had just emerged from what the humans would later explain was hyperspace, a theoretical concept the Confederation scientists had dismissed centuries ago as mathematically impossible. Report, Zextrol commanded, two of his tentacle-like appendages gripping the railing as the massive viewscreen flickered to life. Unknown vessel, Admiral, replied First Officer Klee, her crystalline exoskeleton glinting under the bridge lights. The signatures don't match anything in our database. It's enormous. The bridge fell silent as the image resolved. Against the backdrop of stars hung what could only be described as a fortress. Angular and aggressive in design, the ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with what were unmistakably weapon emplacements. Magnify, ordered Zextrol, his voice steady despite the tension rippling through his neural pathways. The image zoomed in, revealing strange markings on the ship's hull. UNSTHERMOPYL. AE. Klee read, her translator struggling with the unfamiliar script. Classification: unknown. What the Confederation didn't know, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that humanity had been watching. For decades, Earth's deep space monitoring stations had detected faint signals of the Galactic Confederation. While the aliens believed themselves alone in this sector of the galaxy, humans had been studying, learning, and preparing, not out of malice, but out of the cautious pragmatism that had kept the species alive through its tumultuous history. The UNS Thermopylae represented the pinnacle of human engineering, the first of the Defender-class deep space battleships. Built in the orbital shipyards of Mars over a period of 15 years, it carried a crew of 3,000 and enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. Yet its mission today wasn't destruction but introduction. Captain Chen Wei stood on her bridge, her weathered face betraying none of the anxiety churning in her stomach. After 30 years in the United Earth Navy, she'd been handpicked for this mission, understanding full well what rode on her shoulders: the first impression of humanity to an interstellar civilization. "They detected us, Captain," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the tactical station. "Their sensor arrays are scanning us extensively." Chen nodded. "As expected. Are they broadcasting on any frequencies?" "Yes, ma'am. Their communication systems are attempting to establish contact across multiple bands." "Open a channel on all frequencies," Chen ordered. "Let's say hello." Back aboard the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Zextrol was coordinating the Confederation's response. The unidentified vessel had appeared in neutral territory, technically violating no treaties or boundaries, but its size and obvious military capacity triggered every defense protocol in the book. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," announced the communications officer. It appears to be audio-visual. "On screen," ordered Zextrol, straightening his uniform. First contacts were rare in the Confederation's long history. Most species were discovered in their pre-spaceflight stages and carefully integrated over centuries. A civilization appearing suddenly with technology that rivaled or even exceeded their own was unprecedented. The view screen flickered, and the bridge crew collectively gasped. The being on the screen was unfamiliar, bipedal, with only 2 eyes and a curious lack of natural armor. But what struck Zextrol wasn't the alien's appearance, but the unmistakable confidence in its posture. "I am Captain Chen Wei of the United Nations ship Thermopylae, representing the United Earth Government and all humanity. We come in peace and with respect for your sovereignty in this region of space. We request diplomatic dialogue." The translator worked surprisingly well, suggesting that this species, these humans, had already deciphered the Confederation's communication protocols. The implication sent a ripple of unease through Zextrol's mind. How long had they been watching? What else did they know? I am Admiral Zextrol of the Galactic Confederation. Your arrival is unexpected. Our records show no spacefaring civilization in this sector." Captain Chen smiled slightly. "We've been cautious, Admiral. Our history has taught us to observe before introducing ourselves. We've been monitoring Confederation communications for some time." The admission hung in the air like a blade. The Confederation's encryption was thought to be unbreakable. If these humans had been silently listening, what other technological surprises might they possess? As the initial shock wore off, the true diplomatic dance began. The Confederation hastily assembled its first contact team: xenobiologists, cultural specialists, and military advisors, while the humans remained poised and patient in their enormous vessel. The Thermopylae had made no aggressive moves, but its presence alone was enough to shift the balance of power in the sector. Word spread quickly through the nearest Confederation worlds. Images of the human battleship were transmitted across the galactic network, sparking fear, curiosity, and in some quarters, outrage. The Security Council convened an emergency session, with some members calling for immediate military response to this invasion, while others urged caution and diplomatic engagement. What none of them realized was that the Thermopylae wasn't alone. Throughout Confederation space, cloaked human observation posts had been monitoring reactions, preparing contingencies. The battleship was impressive, yes, but it was merely the visible tip of humanity's interstellar presence. 3 days into negotiations, as Admiral Zextrol was beginning to appreciate the complexity of human diplomacy, his worst fears materialized. A separatist faction within the Confederation, the Hegemonic Alliance, dispatched a battle group to confront what they deemed an existential threat to their dominance. "Admiral," Klee's voice cut through the quiet of his quarters. "We've detected multiple warp signatures approaching at combat velocity. It's the hegemony." Zextrol felt his heart sink. "Alert the humans. We need to explain." "Sir, they already know. Their sensors detected the approaching ships before ours did. Captain Chen is requesting to speak with you urgently." When the Admiral returned to the bridge, Chen's face filled the view screen. Her expression was grave but composed. "Admiral, we understand your Confederation isn't entirely unified in its approach to first contact. The incoming vessels appear to have hostile intent. Captain, I assure you this isn't sanctioned by—" Chen raised a hand. "We understand, Admiral. We've studied your political structures. What you need to understand is that while the Thermopylae came in peace, we came prepared for all contingencies." As if on cue, the space around them shimmered as 6 more human vessels decloaked, smaller than the Thermopylae, but no less formidable. They moved with precision to form a defensive perimeter. "The question now," Captain Chen continued, her voice steady, "is whether your Confederation is prepared to witness what happens when someone threatens a human diplomatic mission." Admiral Zextrol stared at the screen, then at the imposing human vessels now visible through the viewports. In that moment, he realized the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had arrived, and they weren't asking for permission to exist among the stars. They were simply informing everyone that they were here, and they were waiting to see what happened next. The Hegemonic Alliance vessels dropped out of warp with practiced precision, their formations tight and threatening. There were 12 of them, sleek predatory shapes against the void, their energy signatures pulsing with combat readiness. In any other circumstance, such a force would have been overwhelming. Today, they merely looked foolhardy. "They're charging weapons," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his fingers dancing across the tactical console. "Looks like they're preparing to launch fighter craft as well." Captain Chen nodded, her expression unreadable. Behind her calm exterior, memories flashed. Earth's bloody history, the countless wars that had nearly destroyed humanity before finally teaching them the value of unity. She would not allow humanity's first major interstellar interaction to devolve into violence, but neither would she show weakness. "Open a channel to Admiral Zextrol," she ordered, "and alert our escort ships to maintain defensive posture only. No preemptive actions. On the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Zex Troll was frantically attempting to contact the hegemonic forces. Commander Vexia, you are in violation of Confederation diplomatic protocols. Stand down immediately. The hegemonic commander's face appeared on the screen, his scaled features set in stubborn lines. With respect, Admiral, these humans appeared in our space without warning, heavily armed. The Security Council debates while we face a potential invasion force. We will not stand idle. You're making a terrible mistake, Zex Troll warned. These humans have demonstrated technology beyond our understanding. Their sensors detected your approach before ours did. Their vessels appeared out of nowhere. Think about what you're doing. Commander Vexia's expression hardened. Perhaps you've been intimidated by their parlor tricks. Admiral, we have not. The transmission cut, and Zex Troll felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine fear. Not for himself, but for what was about to unfold. Sir, First Officer Klee spoke quietly at his side. The human escort vessels, they are positioning themselves between the Hegemony fleet and the Thermopylae. But they haven't powered weapons yet. They're giving the Hegemony a chance to reconsider, Zex Troll realized aloud. Contact Captain Chen again. Immediately. Back on the Thermopylae, Captain Chen was reviewing tactical options with her executive officer, Commander Takashi. The diplomatic package includes our military doctrine, Takashi noted. They know we prioritize defensive engagement and proportional response. Chen frowned slightly. Yes, but knowing something intellectually is different from believing it, especially when staring down the barrel of unfamiliar technology. She paused as her communications officer signaled an incoming transmission. Admiral Zex Troll is hailing us again. The alien admiral's face appeared on screen, his four eyes blinking in what Chen had learned was a sign of distress. Captain Chen, I apologize for this situation. The Hegemony acts without Confederation approval. I'm attempting to order them to stand down, but they're refusing my authority. I understand. Admiral, Chen replied evenly. Internal politics can be complicated. We face similar challenges in our own systems. What she didn't say was that humanity had thoroughly studied the Confederation's political structure. The Human Intelligence Network had identified the Hegemonic Alliance as potential aggressors months ago. This confrontation wasn't entirely unexpected, though its timing was unfortunate. Captain, Rodriguez interrupted, urgency in his voice. The lead Hegemony vessel is locking weapons on our escort ship Defiant. Energy readings suggest they're preparing to fire. Chen turned back to the screen. Admiral, please inform Commander Vexia that any aggressive action will be met with proportional response. We didn't come here to fight, but we are fully prepared to defend ourselves. As she spoke, the tactical display showed the Hegemony ships advancing, fighter craft launching from their hangar base, nearly 100 small, agile vessels swarming toward the human formation. They're not listening, Zex Troll said, desperation in his voice. Captain, perhaps if you withdrew your vessels. That won't be possible, Admiral, Chen replied firmly. Humanity doesn't retreat from diplomatic engagements because of threats. That would set a dangerous precedent for all our future interactions. Far from the tense standoff, on Earth, the United Nations Security Council was in emergency session. Live feeds from the Thermopylae projected the unfolding situation to the assembled representatives of humanity's nations and colonial worlds. This is precisely why we maintained stealth observation for so long, argued the Chinese representative. First contact situations are inherently volatile. The Secretary General nodded gravely. Captain Chen has full authority to defend her ship and crew, but let's hope diplomacy prevails. The last thing we want is for humanity's introduction to the galactic community to be marked by bloodshed. In the cold vacuum between the opposing fleets, the first shot came not as anyone expected. A nervous Hegemony fighter pilot, pushing too close to the human escort ship Vigilant, fired what was likely intended as a warning shot. The energy pulse dissipated harmlessly against the Vigilant's shields, But the line had been crossed. "Target weapons and propulsion systems only," Captain Chen ordered calmly. "Minimal force. I want disabled vessels, not destruction." What followed would later be described in Confederation military academies as the 17-minute lesson. The human escort ships moved with uncanny coordination, their point defense systems intercepting incoming fire with precision that seemed impossible. When they returned fire, their weapons struck with surgical accuracy, disabling engines, weapons arrays, and communication systems while deliberately avoiding life support and crew quarters. Admiral Zextrol watched in stunned silence as the Hegemony's fighters tumbled powerless through space, their systems offline but crews unharmed. The larger vessels fared no better. Within minutes, 11 of the 12 Hegemony warships floated dead in space, their weapons and engines disabled, while the human vessels showed no signs of damage. Only the Hegemony command ship remained operational, though its fighter complement was neutralized and its shields were failing under the precisely targeted barrage from 2 human escorts. "They're being merciful," whispered First Officer Klee, her voice tinged with awe. "They could have destroyed them all." Zextrol nodded slowly. "That's what truly frightens me, Klee. The level of control, the precision. This isn't just advanced technology. This is the product of a species that understands war so intimately they've transcended it." On the bridge of the Thermopylae, Captain Chen was already moving past the brief confrontation. "Hail the Hegemony command ship," she ordered. "Let's see if they're ready to talk now." As the communications officer worked to establish contact, Chen gazed out at the disabled Hegemony fleet. This wasn't how she'd hoped first contact would progress, but perhaps it was necessary. Some species only respected strength, and humanity had just demonstrated theirs, not through wholesale destruction, but through restraint and precision. The real diplomatic work was only just beginning. 3 days after the skirmish with the Hegemony fleet, the diplomatic landscape had shifted dramatically. The Confederation Council had convened an emergency session, with representatives from all 37 member species gathering on their capital world, Harmonex. The UNS Thermopylae maintained its position in neutral space, but now it was joined by a proper diplomatic vessel, the UNS Olive Branch, a sleek, gleaming ship designed specifically for first contact scenarios. Captain Chen stood in the Thermopylae's observation deck, watching as Admiral Zextrol's shuttle approached. In the days since the confrontation, the Vrexian admiral had become humanity's strongest advocate within the Confederation. His first-hand account of the humans' restraint during combat had countered the Hegemony's attempts to paint Earth as an aggressive expansionist threat. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez announced from behind her, "our sensors are detecting unusual activity in the Hegemony home system. Massive energy signatures, consistent with large-scale fleet movements." Chen turned, her brow furrowing. "Forward that data to Admiral Brooks on the Olive Branch, and alert our intelligence section. I want to know what the Hegemony is planning." When Zextrol arrived aboard the Thermopylae, he was accompanied by 3 other aliens, representatives from the Council's diplomatic corps. Chen greeted them in the ship's formal reception area, a space designed to accommodate various physiologies and environmental needs. "Admiral, welcome back," Chen said, extending her hand in what had become their customary greeting, a human handshake modified to accommodate Zextrol's tentacle-like appendages. "Captain Chen," the Admiral replied, performing the gesture with growing confidence. "May I present Councillor Thrix of the Palveri, Ambassador Noor of the Quasics, and Cultural Attaché Lom of the Drell Collective." The introductions complete, they settled into the conference room. The real purpose of this meeting wasn't mere diplomacy, it was a warning. "The Hegemony has been surprisingly quiet in council sessions," Zextrol began without preamble. "Too quiet. Our intelligence suggests they're mobilizing their reserve fleets." Councillor Thrix, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin, leaned forward. "The Hegemony has long sought to dominate Confederation politics. Your arrival, and particularly your demonstration of technological superiority, represents an existential threat to their position. Our demonstration wasn't intended as a threat, Chen replied carefully, only as a proportional response to aggression. Intent and perception rarely align in interstellar politics, Ambassador Noor observed. The Quasics were methane brothers, and Noor spoke through a translation device attached to their environmental suit. The hegemony perceives any power greater than their own as a threat to be eliminated. Chen exchanged glances with her XO, Commander Takashi. They had anticipated resistance, but not necessarily open conflict on this scale. How many ships are we talking about? Takashi asked. At least 300 capital ships, plus support vessels and fighter complements, Zextrol replied grimly. The largest fleet mobilization in 50 years. The human officers maintained their composure, but the implications were clear. The UNS Thermopylae and its escort of 6 ships, while technologically superior, couldn't hope to withstand an assault of that magnitude. We should withdraw, suggested Cultural Attaché Lom, their faceted eyes reflecting the room's lights. Continue diplomatic exchanges from a safer distance. With respect, Chen replied, withdrawal would only confirm the hegemony's suspicion that we can be intimidated. Humanity doesn't respond well to bullying tactics. Back on Earth, the Security Council was reaching the same conclusion. The live feed from the Thermopylae had transmitted the warnings, and humanity's leaders were faced with a critical decision. We have 3 options, the Secretary General summarized. Withdraw our ships and postpone further contact, maintain our current presence and risk confrontation, or reinforce our position. Withdrawal sends the wrong message, argued the Indian representative. Not just to the hegemony, but to the entire Confederation. And maintaining our current force level is simply inviting disaster, added the Brazilian counselor. 7 ships against 300. No matter how advanced our technology, those aren't odds I'm comfortable with. The Secretary General nodded slowly. Then we're agreed. We reinforce. She turned to the military liaison. Admiral Cheng, what assets do we have available? The Admiral consulted her tablet. The 2nd and 5th Deep Space Fleets are on standby. 48 capital ships, plus support vessels. They can arrive via hyperspace jump within 18 hours. As the Council debated the details, light years away, the situation was deteriorating. The hegemony had issued a formal ultimatum to the Confederation Council: either expel the human vessels from Confederation space, or the hegemony would take action to protect Confederation security. It was a transparent pretext for aggression, and everyone knew it. But the hegemony's military might give their words weight. Many council members feared being drawn into a conflict they had neither sought nor prepared for. On the Thermopylae, Captain Chen received new orders from Earth. The reinforcement fleet was on its way, but would it arrive in time? The hegemony ultimatum expired in 12 hours. We should evacuate non-essential personnel to the Olive Branch, suggested Commander Takashi. If things go south, we can at least get the diplomatic courts to safety. Chen nodded. Agreed. And begin running battle drills. If we find ourselves alone against the hegemony fleet, even for a few hours, we'll need to buy time. As evacuation procedures began, Chen requested a private meeting with Admiral Zextrol. They stood in her ready room, looking out at the stars, the same stars that now seemed to promise conflict rather than connection. Admiral, there's something you should know, Chen said quietly. Earth is sending reinforcements. Zextrol's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. More ships. How many? Enough to make the hegemony reconsider. But they won't arrive before the ultimatum expires. If the hegemony attacks, we'll be outnumbered for several hours. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Captain, I must ask, just how extensive is humanity's fleet? The Confederation had no idea you existed until days ago. Yet now you speak of reinforcements that could challenge the hegemony's armada. Chen smiled slightly. Let's just say the Thermopylae isn't the only project Earth has been working on during our period of silent observation. The implication hung in the air between them. Humanity had been preparing, not specifically for conflict with the Confederation, but for the realities of a universe that might not always be welcoming. As the deadline approached, tension built throughout both fleets. The hegemony forces had taken position just outside the neutral zone, their massive armada visible even to the naked eye from the Thermopyla's observation deck. The ship's sensors detected constant communication between hegemony vessels. They were coordinating, preparing for battle. Admiral Zextral had returned to the Eternal Dawn, but not before making a declaration that surprised even Captain Chen. The Admiral had formally requested that the Confederation Council authorize him to stand with the human vessels against hegemony aggression. It was an unprecedented move, taking sides in what could become the first interstellar war involving Earth. Even more surprisingly, 7 other Confederation captains had joined his request. Their ships now formed a protective screen alongside the human vessels, not enough to withstand the hegemony fleet, but a powerful symbolic gesture nonetheless. As the final hour of the ultimatum ticked away, Captain Chen addressed her crew. "I won't lie to you," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive battleship. "The next few hours will be difficult. We face a numerically superior enemy, and our reinforcements are still en route. But remember, we represent humanity here. How we conduct ourselves, win or lose, will shape Earth's relationship with the Confederation for generations to come." She paused, looking at the determined faces of her bridge crew. "We're outnumbered, yes, but the Thermopylae was named for a reason. Sometimes, the most important battles are the ones where victory isn't measured by who's left standing, but by what principles are defended." On the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Zextral watched as the final minutes of the ultimatum expired. His communications officer turned from her console, expression grim. "Sir, the hegemony fleet is powering weapons. They're moving to attack formation." Zextral straightened his uniform. "Signal our allies. Defensive formation around the human vessels, and may whatever gods exist in this universe forgive what happens next." The stars seemed to hold their breath as the hegemony fleet began its advance, hundreds of ships moving in perfect coordination toward the tiny combined force that dared to oppose them. On the Thermopyla's bridge, Captain Chen gave the order that would echo across human history. Battle stations. The first wave of hegemony fighters streaked across the void, energy weapons blazing against the combined human Confederation defense line. The Thermopyla's point defense systems responded with mechanical precision, creating a barrier of interceptor fire that caught dozens of the smaller craft. But for every fighter destroyed, 3 more took its place. "Shields holding at 86%, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez. "The Confederation vessels are taking heavier damage. Their shield technology isn't as robust." Captain Chen nodded grimly. "Tactical. Divert additional power to our port shield array. Extend coverage to overlap with the Eternal Dawn." She turned to her communications officer. "Any word from Earth?" "Nothing yet, Captain. The hegemony is jamming long-range communications. We're limited to short-range tactical channels only." 10 minutes into the battle, the first Confederation ship fell, the cruiser Distant Light exploding in a brilliant flash as hegemony battleships concentrated their fire. The remaining defenders tightened their formation, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. Then, unexpectedly, the massive hegemony flagship broke formation, accelerating toward a position directly above the battlefield. Its weapon systems powered down as a transmission cut through the jamming. "Attention human vessel and Confederation traders. This is Supreme Commander Victorin of the hegemony. Cease fire immediately." The sudden command brought a momentary lull to the battle. Captain Chen exchanged puzzled glances with Commander Takashi before responding. "This is Captain Chen of the UNS Thermopylae. You initiated this conflict, Commander. Are you offering surrender?" A harsh sound, something like laughter, came through the speakers. "Surrender? No, Captain. I'm offering you the opportunity to witness history." On the main view screen, the hegemony flagship's hull began to shimmer with an eerie violet light. Sensor alarms blared across the Thermopyla's bridge. "Captain," shouted the science officer, "we're detecting a massive energy buildup. It's like nothing in our database." Admiral Zextroll's voice cut through on the emergency channel, panic evident in his normally controlled tone. "Captain Chen, you must withdraw immediately. They're deploying a void catalyst." "A what?" Chen demanded, but there was no time for explanation. The space around the Hegemony flagship seemed to warp, stars bending as if viewed through rippling water. The violet glow intensified, expanding outward in a spherical wave. "All ships, emergency evasive," Chen ordered. "Maximum thrust, any vector away from that phenomenon." But it was too late. The wave expanded faster than any ship could move, engulfing first the Hegemony vessels, whose crews clearly believed themselves immune to whatever weapon they had unleashed, and then reaching toward the defenders. As the wave approached the Thermopylae, the ship's sensors captured readings that made no scientific sense. Space itself was unraveling, the fundamental forces of physics coming undone. "Brace for impact," Chen shouted, gripping her command chair as the violet wave washed over them. And then, silence. The lights flickered, systems reset, and for a moment, it seemed as if nothing had happened. Until Rodriguez looked up from his console, face pale with shock. "Captain, we've moved. According to stellar positioning, we're 20 light years from our previous location. And we're not alone." The view screen adjusted, revealing the impossible. Surrounding them were not just the surviving Confederation ships and Hegemony vessels, but an enormous structure, a ring-shaped space station that dwarfed even the largest ships in either fleet. Its architecture was unlike anything in Confederation records, with sweeping curves and materials that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "What the hell is that?" breathed Commander Takashi. Before anyone could answer, the Thermopyla's communication system activated on its own. A voice spoke, neither male nor female, with a resonance that seemed to bypass the speakers and materialize directly in their minds. "Combatants, you have violated neutral space. Cease hostilities immediately." Captain Chen straightened her uniform, her training kicking in despite the extraordinary circumstances. "This is Captain Chen Wei of the United Nations ship Thermopyla. We apologize for our intrusion. We were transported here against our will." "We are aware," the voice replied. "The weapon you call a void catalyst is forbidden technology, developed by those who came before. Its use has consequences." On the screen, they watched as the Hegemony flagship, the source of the weapon, began to disintegrate, breaking apart into constituent atoms without explosion or debris. In seconds, it simply ceased to exist. The rest of the Hegemony fleet hung motionless, their systems apparently disabled. "Chen to Eternal Dawn," the captain called. "Admiral Zextroll, are you receiving?" "We're here, Captain," came the Admiral's shaken voice. "All systems returning to normal. Do you know who they are?" "Not yet," Chen replied. Then, addressing the mysterious presence, "We mean no harm. We are explorers and diplomats from Earth, newly arrived in this region of space." There was a pause, as if the entity were considering her words. "Earth, yes. We have observed your development. You were not expected to achieve hyperspace travel for another century." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Whoever these beings were, they had been watching humanity. "The precursors," whispered Admiral Zextroll through the still-open channel. "They're real." According to Confederation myths, the precursors were an ancient species that had seeded the galaxy with life before mysteriously vanishing. Most considered them legends, until now. "You are correct, Vrexian," the voice confirmed. "Your Confederation has expanded into spaces once belonging to our network. We have allowed this, observing from afar." "Why reveal yourselves now?" Captain Chen asked. "The weapon's activation was detected. We cannot permit such technology to be wielded by younger species. The consequences could collapse reality itself." As they spoke, a ripple appeared in space, the distinctive signature of a human hyperspace jump. The reinforcement fleet from Earth had somehow tracked the Thermopyla's position across 20 light-years. More of your kind approach, the precursor voice noted. Impressive adaptation. The first human battleships emerged from hyperspace, weapons ready, then halted in confusion at the bizarre tableau before them. Stand down, Chen ordered immediately. We have made a new contact. The precursor presence seemed to consider the rapidly evolving situation. Captain Chen Wei of Earth, Admiral Zex Troll of the Confederation. Your species stand at a crossroads. The conflict between you is meaningless in the greater cosmos. The voice paused, and when it resumed, there was something like amusement in its tone. Perhaps it is time for the children to meet the parents. We have watched long enough. The massive ring station began to glow with inner light, sections rotating as dormant systems awakened for the first time in millennia. Across both human and Confederation networks, the same message appeared in every known language. The precursor network is reestablished. All spacefaring species are invited to dialogue. Captain Chen looked at her bridge crew, then at the view screen showing the gathered ships of 3 civilizations: humanity, the Confederation, and now the legendary precursors. What had begun as first contact between 2 spacefaring groups had just expanded into something far greater. Well, she said with a small smile, I think our mission parameters just changed. 2 weeks later, Captain Chen stood in the grand observation dome aboard the precursor station, watching as shuttles arrived from dozens of worlds. The dialogue was about to begin. The first gathering of all known spacefaring species under the guidance of the ancient civilization that may have been responsible for them all. Still hard to believe, isn't it? Admiral Zextrol said, joining her at the window. Their initial wariness had evolved into something resembling friendship over the chaotic days following the precursor revelation. That we're standing on a station built by a species that's millions of years old, or that they apparently had a hand in all our evolutions. Chen smiled slightly. Both seem equally impossible. The hegemony crisis had been diffused by the precursor's intervention. With their flagship destroyed and the rest of their fleet temporarily disabled, Supreme Commander Victorin had little choice but to accept the ceasefire terms proposed by the Confederation Council. The attempted use of forbidden technology had cost them dearly in political standing. The Secretary General arrives within the hour, Chen noted, checking her comm unit. Earth's response to the precursor revelation had been measured. A mixture of excitement at the scientific and cultural opportunities, tempered with caution about the power imbalance between humanity and these ancient beings. I've been meaning to ask, Zextrol said, his 4 eyes blinking in what Chen now recognized as thoughtfulness. Your ship's name. Thermopylae. What does it signify? Chen turned to face the Admiral. It's from Earth history, a small force standing against overwhelming odds to defend something greater than themselves. They didn't win, but they bought time for what mattered. Fitting, the Admiral replied. Though in your case, the battle ended quite differently. They were interrupted by Commander Takashi, who approached with a data tablet. Captain, the precursor representatives are requesting your presence at the preliminary session. Apparently, they've chosen representatives from each major civilization to participate in the initial dialogue. Me? Chen asked, surprised. I'm a naval officer, not a diplomat. According to them, you're exactly who they want. Takashi shrugged. Something about your actions demonstrating humanity's potential. As Chen prepared to depart for the meeting, she took a final look at the gathered ships visible through the observation dome. The Thermopylae floated among vessels of every imaginable design. Confederation cruisers, the remaining hegemony ships, Earth's reinforcement fleet, and now newcomers from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, all answering the precursor call. What had begun as a cautious first contact mission had transformed the galactic political landscape overnight. Humanity, instead of carefully navigating its introduction to a single interstellar community, now stood as equals at a table with dozens of civilizations under the watchful eyes of the beings who might have created them all. You know, Chen said to Zextrol as they walked toward the meeting chamber, we designed the Thermopylae to make an impression during first contact. I think we succeeded, just not in any way we anticipated. The Admiral made the clicking sound that served as Phyrexian laughter. If there's one thing I've learned about humans in our short acquaintance, Captain, it's that you excel at the unexpected. I suspect that's precisely why the precursors are interested in you. As they entered the vast chamber where representatives of a dozen species waited, Chen felt the weight of history on her shoulders. Whatever happened next would shape the course of human development for generations to come. The U.S. Thermopylae had set out to introduce humanity to the stars. Instead, it had helped usher in a new age for all spacefaring civilizations. The first battleship of Earth had indeed made an impression, and as the precursor representatives glided forward to begin the dialogue, Chen knew with absolute certainty this was only the beginning.